1961. I'll also be sprinkling in some of Butch Blake's illustrations from the 1995 reprint because those are pretty great. Anyway, Chapter 2, James is hard at work chopping wood while his nasty aunts enjoy refreshing lemonade and making up little poems about their supposed good looks, which we actually get to hear in the movie.
I do declare, as lovely as a rose, doth feast your eyes upon my face. Observe my shapely neck. Behold my silky locks. And if I take off both my socks, you'll see my But don't forget, my dearest sponge, how much your tomatoes.
But when poor James hits his breaking point, where he's just physically and mentally exhausted, he starts to cry. And this is putting a damper on his aunt's day, so they tell him to get out of their sight. And it's at this point that Dahl really lays on his trademark weirdness. In the middle of James crying his eyes out, a small old man with a huge bald head emerges from the bushes. He's wearing a dark green suit, and in a creepy voice he says, "Come closer to me, little boy. Come right up close to me, and I will show you something wonderful." You know, a lesser man would make a risque joke about that choice of phrasing, and I am that lesser man. I'm just glad he didn't tell James to put his hand in his pocket. Instead, he pulls out a small white paper bag, and while standing so close to James that James can feel and smell his hot, bitter, musty breath, he reveals that in the bag are little glowing green things that look like stones or crystals. But in the movie, they look like radioactive macaroni noodles. When James asks what they are, the mysterious man replies that they're crocodile tongues. 1,000 long, slimy crocodile tongues boiled up in the skull of a dead witch for 20 days and nights with the eyeballs of a lizard, and the fingers of a young monkey, the gizzard of a pig, the beak of a green parrot, the juice of a porcupine, and 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Stir for another week, and then let the food do the rest. Now, up to this point, the movie has recreated this interaction almost exactly, but the context for that meeting is a little different. Instead of it happening after Sponge and Spiker tell James and his orphan tears to get lost, it takes place after James rescues the spider from them and runs outside to set it free. But another huge difference is that in the book, the mysterious man tells James to add the green things to a jug of water, add 10 hairs from his head, and when the water starts to boil, to drink it. Well, in the movie, he doesn't say what to do with them at all. He just says they contain a lot of magic and not to lose them. Another noticeable difference is that the movie's version of this man kind of resembles Roald Dahl, which I think was a nice touch, while the book version looks like Azog the White Orc had a baby with a street urchin. Where the versions reconverge is what happens next. While running inside to make use of this new magic, James wipes out, ripping the bag open and setting the crocodile on screen. And while the poor kid scrambles to salvage them, it only takes a few seconds before they've burrowed into the dirt, where the only possible recipients of their magic are bugs and the roots of the peach tree. This is when the ants show up again. They see James lying on the ground, and instead of helping him up, they yell that he needs to get back to work. Only before he can even chop one more log, he hears one of his ants scream. When he turns around, he sees a peach has sprouted from one of the tree branches. But that's not all. That lone peach appeared to be growing. It was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in another minute, this mammoth fruit was as large and round and fat as Aunt Sponge herself, and probably just as heavy. The peach finally stops growing when it's the size of the tree it was growing from. And while the fat ant just wanted to gobble it up, big surprise, the skinny ant saw it as a money-making opportunity. Once again, even this little detail is perfectly reflected in the film.
It smells delicious. No. It smells like money.
Soon enough, Aunt Spiker's plan has been fully realized. The giant peach is officially the 8th wonder of the world. Sorry, King Kong. And they're making cash hand over fist by selling tickets to see it. But naturally, James doesn't get to participate in the excitement. Even though he's the reason the peach sprouted, the ants lock him up all day long and only let him out to clean up the trash that the sightseers leave behind. It's not exactly clear how long this goes on for. It could be just one day or maybe a few, but one night, after James had been sent outside to clean, he finds himself staring at the peach in total amazement, and he decides that while the ants are busy counting their money, he's going to climb the fence to get a closer look. Upon doing this, he happens to notice there is a hole in the side of the peach, and after looking a little closer, he realizes that's no hole, That's a tunnel. I had a similar experience when I took your mom out on a date this weekend. Now, James figured that his life was pretty crap and that dying inside a collapsed peach was preferable to one more minute of living with his aunts. So he climbed into the tunnel, bracing himself for what he might find inside. This is the moment in the movie where he transforms into his animated self, which is explained by him eating a piece of the peach that the crocodile tongue had burrowed into. But this kind of transformation was obviously not necessary in the book, so when Book James loses his crocodile tongues, they're all gone for good. Back to the tunnel, James continues to crawl deeper and deeper into it until he reaches a solid wall, which he realizes is the peach pit. And after giving it a little push, a doorway opens up and he crawls through that too, only to regret his decision immediately.
Oh, I love that hairstyle so much. Now, I really love this cat sweater I have leather. That's just been so cute. That's been my favorite lately. And I really love these shoes. So not only can you customize your clothes, but you customize your character at the beginning of the game, and you can change it anytime. So you can go here and change your hair, change your makeup, change anything you really want in here. The pocket blocks, I really had fun.
Pocket blocks, play now.
Before James had time to look around and take in his new surroundings, he heard several voices say, "Look who's here. We've been waiting for you." And when his eyes finally adjusted to the dim lighting inside the peach, he was horrified at the creatures those voices came from. Surrounding him were giant bugs. A ladybug, a spider, a grasshopper, a centipede, an earthworm, a silkworm, and a glowworm. All of these nasty beasts appear in the movie as well, except for the silkworm. But, spoiler alert, he doesn't do much of anything through the whole story, so it makes sense that neither the writers nor animators wanted to deal with him. Anyway, just like in the film, James initially worries that these bugs are going to eat him, but they laugh at the idea, saying that he's one of their crew now. Then he asks how they all got so big, and they reply that they ate the glowing green things that were digging through the dirt. Next, we get a little sample of everyone's personalities, which are all reflected pretty accurately in the movie as well. The grasshopper is a refined gentleman. The earthworm is blind and constantly stressed about his imminent death. The centipede is a pest and proud of it. The spider is tender-hearted and goes out of her way to make web beds for all of her roommates. The ladybug is similar to the spider, and the glowworm gives off old lady vibes. The biggest differences in their portrayals are that none of them are described as having East Coast or Russian accents. Also, their costumes are a little different. Like, for some reason, the spider is wearing a chef's hat, and the centipede looks like he's in a barbershop quartet. Well, after James gets his introductions out of the way, it's officially bedtime, and after spending the next 2 hours untying the centipede's 42 shoes and placing them neatly along the side of his bed, he's finally able to pass out. The following morning, James wakes up to the sound of the centipede chopping away at the stem that connects the peach to the tree. And within a few moments, that connection's been severed, allowing the peach to roam free. Or, I guess I should say, roll free. This is where our first major difference between the book and movie appears. And in true messed up origins fashion, it's pretty messed up. Remember how in the movie, after the peach starts to roll, Sponge and Spiker try to escape its path in their car, only to end up nearly getting crushed? Well, in the book, something similar happens, but they don't have a car to protect them. Instead, the peach rolls directly over them and crushes them to death. In the words of Doll, there was a crunch, and then there was silence. And behind it, Aunt Sponge and Spiker lay ironed out upon the grass, as flat and thin and lifeless as a couple of paper dolls cut out of a picture book. RIP. Now, if you've seen the movie, then you already know what happens next. The peach continues to roll down the hill all the way through the streets of London, causing a whole mess of chaos in the process. And eventually, they wind up rolling off a cliff and landing in the ocean. This is much to the bugs' dismay because so few of them can swim. And let me tell you, these bugs are lucky that James is with them. Otherwise, they would have surely been consumed by panic and fear. After James explains they won't have to swim because the peach is floating, they start freaking out over not having any food. And once again, James points out that their whole ship is made of food.
Our whole ship is made of food.
More than they could possibly eat on their journey. Speaking of their journey, in the movie we learned right away that the SS Peach is headed to New York City, which just so happens to be the perfect place for these pests. But at this point in the book, the crew has no idea where they're going. Despite that, their spirits stay high because they have James to rely on. Now, while the crew gets settled in for their adventure, I want to take a quick moment to let you all know that our community has an adventure of our own coming up. And you're invited. I'm partnering with Trip to give our community the opportunity of a lifetime to travel to Ireland with a whole bunch of our fellow folklore and mythology nerds. You can basically think of it as a study abroad trip, only instead of writing papers and studying for tests, our only concern is seeing the most awe-inspiring sights that Ireland has to offer. Sites like the Rock of Cashel, the Ring of Kerry, Adair Village, the Cliffs of Moher, and Connemara National Park, where we'll get to go on a kayak tour. And don't worry, I am not in charge of leading this thing. I'll be crushing pints of Guinness alongside you all, while 2 local guides accompany us the whole time, answering all of our questions and helping us make the most of this experience. The trip is booked for June 5th, 2024 to June 12th, so 8 days total. And those who want to join can follow the Trip link in the description and pinned comment to reserve your spots. 2 important caveats, though. Number 1, the cost of the trip is $3,900, and that covers all of your hotel reservations, the local guides, transportation between destinations, and transfers to and from the airport. You do not have to pay the full fee at once either. All you need is a 25% deposit, and that just needs to be paid off at least 60 days before the trip. And the second caveat is there are only 14 spots left, 8 of which will get a $100 early bird discount. So if you know you want to see the Emerald Isle in this lifetime, you may want to jump on it soon. Remember, that link is in the description and pinned comment. I hope to see you there. Now, unfortunately for James and his new friends, they don't get to enjoy their time on the beach for very long before there's a very real emergency. Their peach, which is currently floating in the ocean, gets swarmed by sharks. And I don't just mean 2 or 3 sharks. There are at least 100 gathered around them, furiously attacking the peach in the hopes of sinking it so they can munch on the juicy bugs sitting on top. Fans of the movie will no doubt remember a very similar emergency taking place, but instead of a bunch of little sharks, it's a massive mechanical one. Fun fact, this is one of the few parts of the movie that wasn't made with stop motion. Instead, the animators opted for a new cutting-edge technology called computer-generated imaging, or CGI, to create this monstrosity. Well, in both versions of the story, it's James who comes up with the escape plan. He's noticed that a flock of seagulls have been gathering over them for a while, waiting for their opportunity to snatch the fattest worm they had ever seen. So he suggests they use the worm as bait to lure the seagulls to them. When the seagulls get close enough, they use threads spun by the spider and the silkworm to tie little leashes around their necks. And before long, they have a whopping 501 seagulls attached to them. Just enough to lift it out of the water, but not enough to be out of range of the sharks. It's the 502nd seagull that gets them in the clear. And curiously, when the grasshopper flies down to the base of the peach to inspect the damage, he finds sharks are pretty terrible at eating giant peaches. Because their noses stick out so much farther than their mouths, there is no way for them to get their teeth into the vast, smooth surface, similar to when a small dog tries to get its mouth around a tennis ball. In other words, our heroes were never in that much danger at all. It was all in their heads, which is reminiscent of the lesson the movies try to teach us. Probably not a coincidence. Now, at risk of making this presentation kind of confusing, I feel like it's my duty to mention that the previous discussion the crew had about what they're going to eat on their journey doesn't happen in the movie until after they defeat the shark.
Shit, they made of food.
And then the centipede breaks out into a musical number about all the food he's tried around the world. The reason I wanted to mention it is the lyrics to this song come directly from the book. And while I sadly can't actually play it for you without getting a copyright strike, I just love how dedicated these writers were to honoring the source material. Following that train of thought, after the panic from the shark dies down, the book version of the grasshopper starts playing music for his crew. There's a very similar scene in the movie where he plays the violin for James and even gives him a little music lesson. However, the book specifically says that he's playing his body like a violin. The bow of the violin, the part that moved, was his back leg. The string of the violin, the part that made the sound, was the edge of his wing. He was using only the top of his back leg, thigh, and he was stroking this up and down against the edge of his wing with incredible skill, sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but always with the same easy flowing action. The author uses this scene to teach his young readers a little about the bugs that are accompanying James on his journey. We learn that the grasshopper keeps his ears in his belly, that ladybugs kill the pests that try to harm farmers' crops, and then we hear a very sad story from the spider. It turns out that was over the edge of the without
Don't do this. Don't do that. Be fun. Sophisticated. Dance. Don't dance.
The best time to get a Reese's? Anytime. I'd also accept all the time.
Without hesitation, James comes to his rescue. He ties the silkworm silk around his waist and jumps in after the centipede. And after a few minutes, the bugs still on board begin lamenting the deaths of their two companions. This scene bears a strong resemblance to another scene in the film. When Centipede falls asleep at the wheel and gets them lost, he takes it upon himself to track down a compass from one of the nearby shipwrecks, forcing James and Miss Spider to jump in after him and get into a scuffle with Jack Skellington. There's even a moment where the bugs accept that their friend was killed, just like in the book. But, surprise, surprise, everyone survived, and now they can get back to their journey. Now we've hit the end of the book's second act, and this also happens to be where the plot takes a serious detour compared to the events of the movie. You guys are not ready for what Part 3 has in store. First, though, I want to thank our fabulous sponsors who made this behemoth of an episode possible, Squarespace. Just like how James boarded the SS Peach and went on the adventure of a lifetime, you can start a new adventure with Squarespace, and this one is guaranteed to have fewer bugs. Squarespace has made a name for themselves by empowering us web design novices with the ability to create beautiful websites easily, efficiently, and affordably. To start, you get to choose from a huge selection of award-winning templates, and then you can customize them how you see fit with their intuitive drag-and-drop interface. They also give you access to marketing tools and analytics so you can make sure your website is running efficiently, and on the rare occasion it's not, they offer personalized customer support 24/7. So if you want to join me, James, and the thousands of mere mortals who didn't let our dreams stay dreams, just go to Squarespace.